Shabbat Shalom, my friends. We are in the middle of an intense heat wave here in Los Angeles, and in our sweltering, we join with our friends on the East Coast. They're sweltering as well as with many of our friends in Israel who are suffering through a rather extreme drought at this moment. So let's find relief for a few minutes in the cooling waters of Torah. Sounds good, right? Cooling waters, Torah. Ismar Shorsh, the Chancellor Emeritus of the Jewish Theological Seminary, once wrote, I quote, "In rabbinic parlance, water stands for Torah. The association is basic and self-evident. Both are life-giving elements. As water sustains organic life, so Torah nourishes Jewish life. Thus, when Isaiah calls out, 'Ho, all who are thirsty, come for water,' even if you have no money, the rabbis take his words as an invitation to enter the world of Torah. Torah, Mayim Chayim, the living waters, they'll be cool." Okay, so let's get started with this week's Sedra. Let's enter the world of life-sustaining Torah once again. Our Sedra, Pinchas, Numbers 25, verses 10 and following. At the end of last week's Sedra, the Israelites are seduced into sexual licentiousness by the Midianites. Not only are our ancestors, how do we say this nicely, running amok, but they are also quite willing to connect their activities with the worship of Baal Peor, a major pagan god. And this is occurring not at the beginning of the 40 years wandering, but in the 40th year. For 40 years, they have been under God's protection. For 40 years, they have eaten the miraculous manna. For 40 years, they have learned God's laws and prepared to enter the land, the promised land, the only place on earth where they believe that the Torah of God can be fully observed. Dafka, precisely at this moment, our ancestors go wild. What follows next is no surprise until it becomes a shock. Moses is furious. God is furious. But the pagan party continues unabated, with a good time being had by all. Suddenly, a man named Pinchas from the tribe of Levi picks up a spear and without a word kills an Israelite man and a Midianite woman who were, shall we say, fornicating in public. The party quickly comes to an end. God strikes the people with a punishing plague, many die, and, of course, the people repent. And how does God respond to Pinchas? There are no words of rebuke here. God rewards Pinchas with a Brit Kahuna Olam and a Brit Shalom. Pinchas and his family are elevated to the ranks of the Kohanim. And Pinchas himself gets the gift of a Brit Shalom, a covenant of peace. The rabbis take this rather shocking award ceremony even further. Some rabbis, a few, would have Pinchas invited over to Mount Sinai for a personal interview with God. Others declared that Pinchas was granted an extraordinarily long life and a name change. You see, in their eyes, Pinchas becomes Elijah. Elijah the prophet, the herald of the Messiah, and our Pinchas, some say, are the very same person. Pinchas, Elijah, will herald the moment of universal redemption with no regard for the blood on his hands. Why was there such a response to a public killing that was carried out with no courtroom, no legal process, no chance for the accused to say a mitigating word? Easy. God was thrilled, so we're taught, that Pinchas did what Moses, old man, should have done. Moses was standing around in shock, probably hysterical. Pinchas acted. Pinchas defended the honor of God. Pinchas was, in a sense, acting as the avenging arm of God. And the Talmud seems to have loved the role that Pinchas played. Yes, he acted on the spot. Yes, he acted as a self-righteous fundamentalist. Yes, he acted without consultation. You see, that Israelite man wasn't just having public sex with a Midianite woman. He was doing so as an act of public disdain toward God. This was rebellion and not just a party. Pinchas could have delayed his response and asked Moses up front for approval. But if he had asked, Moses would have had to refer the matter to a Beit Din, to an established court. But this was an et la'asot, a time, an emergency, demanding immediate action. At least Pinchas thought so. Torah was at stake, and Pinchas acted. Way to go, Pinchas. Pinchas could have chosen to do nothing, but his love for God would not tolerate such an approach. Pinchas could have waited for the leadership to do something. After all, Pinchas was not yet a leader. But Pinchas could feel no need for a delay. There is a Chabad website that offers the following summary, and I quote, "The Pinchas model applies with regard to every individual today. For every one of us has a unique contribution to make. With the confidence that comes from the truth of our inner conviction, we must all take the initiative and teach the truth, and not sell our true belief short for a pat on the back from the prominent and the popular." Close quote. Now, I'm not sure that Pinchas was doing much teaching as he skewered the two. Okay. Some of us can read the story as one that celebrates what I would call a cowboy approach to the law, taking the law into our own hands because there is no sheriff in town. Some of us can read this story as celebrating the difference between a person passionately committed and an out-of-control zealot or fundamentalist. Some would teach, so long as Pinchas didn't get a good feeling from his act, so long as no other response was possible, and so long as the act was a response to an immediate threat to our people's survival and to the Torah's role in our future, then Pinchas, some rabbis would add, should serve as a beautiful model for our own behavior. He testified by his actions to what he considered to be God's truth, no more and no less. So how do we parse this story? How do we tease it apart? The book of Leviticus in the Holiness Code warns us against taking vengeance. The human task, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, is to love our neighbor as ourselves. Vengeance belongs only to God. In Deuteronomy, we again encounter the assertion that vengeance belongs to God, not to us. Deuteronomy also sets up cities of refuge for those who have killed another bishkaga by accident. And the Goel Dam, the blood avenger, is forbidden to enter a city of refuge. There are different kinds of justice in our world, my friends. Distributive justice, divine justice, the kind of justice that is expressed through an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Justice can be understood by some as a way of keeping faith with the deceased. Justice can be channeled into a blood feud that goes on generation after generation, blood calling out to blood. Justice is often intertwined with and confused with the quest for revenge for vengeance. Justice and revenge can, in the minds of some, be synonyms. I'm not sure they are. And justice must therefore never be defined by the single individual, so that confusion doesn't occur. The rabbis praised Pinchas, but they never made of him an actual practical role model for us. There is disruption and disorder in vengeance. Taking the law into our own hands, even if somehow such an act could be viewed as necessary, threatens the moral order. Justice, as defined by and carried out by individuals, can undermine that very fragile structure which we know is human civilization. Jewish tradition always links mishpat v'tzedek, justice and righteousness. Justice must be exercised with righteousness. And righteousness can only work in a society that is just. Now, I don't dream of Elijah as a cowboy. And I will not acclaim Pinchas as my hero. I celebrate the power of my conscience, but I will never set myself apart from the quest for justice modified by righteousness and righteousness fortified by justice. That's it for today. We have a lot to think about, so enjoy your thinking. Enjoy Shabbat. Please drink shtumayim, drink water, stay cool, hit share. We'll see you next week.